The shimmer on the bathroom carpet caught my eye as I stepped in, a reflection of the sunlight filtering through the blinds. It wasn't bright enough to blind me, but it was enough to make me pause. Barefoot, I glanced down, not wanting to step on something sharp. Emma hadn't mentioned dropping anything, but who knew? At first, I didn't see it. Without the light, it blended in with the carpet. Then, there it was, a tiny circle of foil, gleaming as it hit the floor. I bent down to pick it up. It was the backing from a pill strip, the kind that pops out when you push a pill through. Usually, it stays attached, but sometimes, like now, it breaks free. I inspected it. One side blank, the other marked. It was Wednesday, so this must have been Tuesday's pill. I stood there, puzzling over it. I wasn't on any medication. I was 35, healthy, and so was Emma. We'd both had our checkups recently. So why was there a pill strip in the bathroom? The only pill that came to mind was birth control, but Emma hadn't been on the pill in years, not since my vasectomy 2 years ago after our second child. She had no issues with her periods, no need for any kind of medication, at least none that I knew of. For a brief moment, I wondered if she was hiding some illness from me, but then I remembered our physicals. We were both fine. Still, if the foil was here, then the pills must be here too. I locked the door and started searching. Emma was still asleep in the other room. It took some time, but I found them, tucked away at the bottom of a tampon box, hidden inside a box of aspirin. The pill strip was familiar. She'd taken the same ones before I had the surgery, back when we were spacing out our kids. But why was she on them again? Only one explanation came to mind. She had slept with someone who could get her pregnant. She had cheated on me. Emma and I had been together for 9 years. We met shortly after I finished university while I was studying to become an engineer. She worked as an assistant. We met in a bar, and although we didn't click immediately, there was enough between us for her to agree to dinner. Emma was tall, just a couple of inches shorter than my 5'10", with an athletic build from her years as an athlete. Her slim figure and small breasts never really changed, but her best feature was her ass, always my favorite. We dated for about a year before getting married when I was 26. We now had 2 kids, Henry and Sophia, aged 5 and 2. After Sophia's birth, I'd had the vasectomy. We agreed 2 was enough, the perfect family setup. Emma had returned to work after maternity leave for both kids. She loved her job, and we hired an au pair to watch the kids during the day. The au pair's wages ate up most of Emma's salary, but she didn't care. She just wanted to get out of the house. I worked with a few friends, running our own engineering firm. We weren't rich, but life was good, or so I thought. I cleaned up the bathroom, put the pills back, and realized I couldn't confront her. Not yet. I needed a plan, evidence. Where would this lead? I had no idea. But first, I needed facts. Who? When? How long? Was it someone at work? Her boss? An ex? And then the darkest thought crossed my mind. Were the kids even mine? I had to be sure. No matter how much it hurt, no matter the betrayal brewing inside, I had to know if this was real before I let myself feel anything. I still didn't have enough facts to make any conclusions, but I knew where to start. I went online, searching for DNA test kits. Testing the kids would be simple. I often put them to bed before Emma came home, so getting samples wouldn't be an issue. I'd also ordered some surveillance equipment, a few small voice recorders to hide in her car and bag, along with tiny cameras to place around the house. I doubted she was doing anything here, given that she was rarely home when I wasn't, or at least, I didn't think so. Next, I needed access to her phone. I found a cloning tool that would allow me to duplicate her phone, giving me access to her messages, emails, and even the ability to listen to calls. For that, I needed to buy another phone. It took several days for everything to arrive, and during that time, I kept a close eye on Emma. She didn't act any differently. Our sex life was the same, once or twice a week, usually on the weekends when we had more time. There was nothing suspicious. No rushing to the shower as soon as she got home. No strange smells. It was all normal. Either there was no affair, or she was incredibly discreet, or worse, maybe she'd been at it for so long that it had become second nature. The packages arrived on Friday morning. I had them sent to my office to avoid any questions. Now, I had everything. DNA test kits, voice recorders, cameras, a new phone, and the cloning tool. It was time to act. That afternoon, I left work early. When I got home, the au pair was feeding the kids dinner. I left her to it while I went around hiding the cameras, one in the bathroom, another in the living room, and the third in the bedroom with a clear view of the bed. I heard the kids playing in the bathroom and went in to help them get ready for bed. I made a cheek swab from Sophia and tucked it in my pocket before reading to her until she fell asleep. When I checked on Henry, he was still awake. The au pair was reading to him, so I offered to take over and let her head home. She gratefully accepted, and it didn't take long for me to get Henry swabbed too. Within 20 minutes, he was asleep. I packaged the swabs along with mine and put them in the mailbox for the postman to pick up in the morning. The service promised results within 48 business hours, so I know by Wednesday. Emma came home on time and everything went as usual. We shared the mundane details of our day, neither of us really listening to the other. After dinner, she went to shower. Taking advantage of the moment, I placed the voice recorders in her car and bag, then cloned her phone. I scrolled through the clone for anything incriminating, messages, emails, but found nothing. Either she was being extremely careful or maybe, just maybe, there was no affair. The weekend passed like it always did. We had sex both mornings before the kids woke up. It was almost a ritual by now, something we did out of habit, something routine. Over the weekend, there were no calls or messages, which made sense. We were together the entire time. Still, the pill strip told me everything I needed to know. The pills were disappearing day by day, and since I wasn't taking them, she clearly was. On Monday, I told Emma I'd be working from home. After she left for the office, I immediately retrieved the flash drives from the hidden cameras. The bathroom camera confirmed what I suspected. She took the pills, but it was the bedroom footage that revealed something unexpected. On Saturday night, while I was cooking dinner, Emma took a shower. Afterward, I watched as she sat on the bed, phone in hand, texting someone. I checked the cloned phone. Nothing. That could only mean one thing. She had a second phone. I replayed the footage carefully, watching her every move. After sending the message, she walked over to the vent in the bedroom, unlatched it, and hid the phone inside. By the time I checked the vent myself, the phone was gone. She must have taken it with her when she left. I was getting closer, but I needed to get my hands on that phone. Later that night, when she came home, I observed her closely. She dropped her bag in the hallway and went through her usual routine. After dinner, while she showered, I rifled through her bag. No phone. She must have hidden it in the vent again. What she didn't know was that Sophia's room was on the other side of the duct. I crept into Sophia's room, careful not to wake her, and opened the vent. There it was, the secret phone. I quickly took it to my office and cloned it onto my new phone in a matter of minutes. After returning it to the vent, I was nearly done when I heard Emma getting out of the shower. Panicking, I slid into Sophia's bed, pretending to stroke her hair just as Emma entered the room. "Is something wrong?" she asked softly. I shook my head. "I like to sit with them sometimes," I whispered, just to remind myself how lucky I am to have such wonderful children. She smiled, thinking it was a sweet gesture. "You're a soft old man," she said. "Come on, let's go before you wake her up." The next day, I finally had time to look at the clone phone, and that's when everything fell apart. Sitting in my office, I stared at the screen, reading the messages in disbelief. Tears streamed down my face as the weight of it all sank in. I didn't even hear the sound of my secretary's intercom, her voice muffled as she tried to get my attention. Eventually, she must have gotten frustrated because she knocked lightly and opened the door. She saw me, broken, lost. And for a moment, the world felt like it had stopped. Evelyn, my secretary, was a woman who exuded professionalism. She dressed far older than her age, and I would guess she was somewhere between 30 and 40. Her red hair and green eyes stood out, but she always kept her appearance conservative, wearing outfits that wouldn't be out of place on someone decades older. We had always maintained a strictly professional relationship. I never crossed a line, and I'd seen what happened when others did. One of my business partners, notorious for his way with women, had tried to charm her. It didn't end well. Evelyn had come to me directly, making it clear that if he didn't stop, she would resign and file a lawsuit, not just for constructive dismissal, but also for sexual harassment. She also told me that the only reason she hadn't done it sooner was because I had always treated her with respect. My partner, furious, had given an ultimatum. Either she leaves or he does. In the end, he was the one who left, and I became the owner of 60% of the company. Evelyn's professionalism remained unshaken, and she never mentioned the incident again. When she saw me in my office, Her usual stoic demeanor softened for just a moment. She disappeared for a few minutes, and I heard muted voices from the outer office. Then everything went quiet. She returned, closed the door behind her, and locked it. Pulling a chair from the other side of my desk, she sat directly in front of me, just a meter away. Without a word, she produced some tissues from her seemingly endless supply and handed them to me. I took them, barely aware of what I was doing, and wiped the tears from my eyes. "Tell me," she said, her tone steady but not cold. Wordlessly, I handed her the phone. The messages between Emma and the other man filled the screen. No names were mentioned, but the content was damning. Arrangements for secret meetings, descriptions of intimate moments that seemed to last forever. He knew things about her that only I should know. The mole on the inside of her thigh, the way she made little sounds during sex, details only a long-term lover could describe. What hurt the most was that I wasn't mentioned at all. It was as if I didn't exist. No mention of me getting in the way, or anything I had done. I simply wasn't there. "Do you know who?" Evelyn asked, her voice still businesslike, but there was an undercurrent of sympathy. I shook my head. "How did you find out?" And just like that, the story poured out of me. I told her everything, from finding the small piece of foil in the bathroom to discovering the pills. I didn't hold back, letting it all flow like an unstoppable river. The entire time, she sat there, listening without interrupting, her green eyes focused on me. At some point, I realized she was holding my hand. It was the first time I could remember us ever touching. "You need more information," she said softly after I finished. "The children's DNA results will come in on Wednesday. Can you hold on until then?" "I don't know," I admitted, my voice cracking. She nodded, a silent acknowledgement of my pain. "Our producers in Portland need to see you urgently," Evelyn said, her voice steady. "I've booked you a ticket for the next flight. You'll be back on Thursday." I was too numb to argue, my mind swirling. Evelyn seemed to sense my hesitation. "That's what you'll tell Emma," she said as she took my phone, typing quickly. Her fingers flew over the screen. Something came up in Portland. We need to go handle it. I'll be back Thursday. Love you, *. Emma's reply came almost immediately. Okay, let me know when you get there. See you when you're back, *. Evelyn glanced at the message, her lips curling ever so slightly. She handed the phone back and then made a call on hers. "Harcourt," she said. "It's Evelyn." "Yes, thank you. Are you free this afternoon?" "Great, see you then." Turning to me, she resumed her brisk, no-nonsense tone. "Go get yourself in order." I was on autopilot, following her commands without thinking. Evelyn had always had that effect on me at work. Her tone brooked no argument, and I simply complied. It felt oddly comforting to let someone else make decisions for a while. When I came out of the bathroom, Evelyn was holding my jacket. "Where are we going?" I asked, still dazed. "You have an appointment with an old friend of mine," she said simply. I didn't argue. I just followed. Harker turned out to be Evelyn's best friend, a divorce lawyer who had helped her through her own separation after catching her husband with one of his employees. As Evelyn explained my situation, I sat there in a haze, feeling like a bystander in my own life. This couldn't be happening to me. Harker, however, was no stranger to such situations. Once Evelyn finished laying out the facts, Harper's sharp gaze turned to me. "Gary?" she asked, her voice cutting through the fog in my mind. I barely registered it. Then, out of nowhere, I felt a sharp sting on my cheek. Evelyn had slapped me, waking me from my stupor. I blinked in shock, as did Harker, though a flicker of amusement crossed her face before she quickly became serious again. "Gary," Harker repeated, "do you have any idea what you want to do with this?" It was like flipping a switch. My engineer's mind snapped into action, sorting through the chaos. I muttered, "Heal them both." I expected outrage, or at least surprise, but Evelyn grinned. Harper, however, remained unfazed. "Okay, I get it," she said dryly. "But unfortunately, that's not an option. It's illegal." She leaned forward, her demeanor professional. "However, there are legal options. Let's go through them. But before I start, I want to be clear. I'm only laying out your choices. I'm not advocating for any specific course of action. We'll get to that later." She held my gaze. "The first option is to do nothing. She doesn't know that you know. As far as I can tell, you've had a relatively happy life up until now, and if you can continue that, you could choose to stay. Keep playing the ignorant game. Secondly, Harker continued, her tone clinical, an amicable divorce. File on the grounds of irreconcilable differences. Divide your assets. Company, home, finances. Given she earns less than you, you'll likely be paying child support for years, at least until the kids finish high school. She barely paused before moving on. Thirdly, go nuclear. Sue her for adultery. If the children aren't yours, sue for falsifying their birth certificates. Sue the other man for alienation of affection. If he's the father, make him pay back every penny you've spent on the kids. If he's a co-worker, hit him for violating the company's fraternization policy. Most businesses have one nowadays. If the guy is married, expose the affair to his wife. If she doesn't know, I can represent her in her divorce. You can also make everything public. Tell friends, family, colleagues. If she's part of any clubs, societies, or church groups, expose her there too. Humiliate her. Protect your assets. Sell your share of the company into an offshore trust. Mortgage the house. Liquidate everything. Empty your 401 if necessary and throw yourself a party in Vegas. The cold practicality of it all hit me like a freight train. I understood the gravity of what she was laying out. Option 1 was out of the question. I'd already been an unknown cuckold for too long. No way I was staying willingly. Option 2? Never. I had worked too hard building my business and our lifestyle for her to take half and then live off my support while she continued living her double life. I looked Harker in the eye. Option 3. Nuclear. Harper's lips curled into a faint smile. Fine, she said, nodding. I'll start the paperwork. In the meantime, keep up the surveillance on your wife. Find out who, when, and where. We need more evidence. She paused, holding up the phone I'd cloned. May I keep this? It's not doing you any good anymore. I nodded, handing her the phone. Evelyn and I left Harper's office in silence. She drove me to a small family hotel and booked a room for me. Go take a shower, she instructed, and order something to eat. I'll be back later with a few things for you. I moved mechanically, hollowed out, doing whatever she said without question. I sat in the hotel room, staring blankly at the menu, as if I were on a routine business trip. Everything I'd built over the last 9 years was crumbling around me, and here I was, ordering room service like it didn't matter. What really stung was the realization of how blind I'd been to everything. How could I have missed the signs? Was it her boss, the one she always returned to after maternity leave, the one she said made her feel independent? Was that the real reason she loved her job, or was it because she couldn't stand being away from him? I glanced at the minibar, my hand moving toward a bottle, ready to drown it all out. But Evelyn entered the room, her voice cutting through the fog. Don't even think about it, she said sternly. I need you clear-headed. You can't plan your next steps if you're at the bottom of a bottle. Plan? I asked, my voice bitter. I asked her. She stared at me for a moment, her expression unreadable. I waited, expecting some kind of sympathy, maybe even a hug, but instead, she glanced at her watch. Okay, she said, her tone all business. The pity party's over. How many times, when we were starting the company, did you run into obstacles and your plans fell through? I blinked, caught off guard. What does that have to do with? How many? She insisted. I sighed. I don't know, a bunch. Like when the patent office lost our application for the inversion filament, she reminded me. Or when the bank tried to foreclose early because they were under pressure. I nodded. Yeah, I remember. At what point, she pressed, did you ever sit down, put your head in your hands and give up? I paused, realizing where she was going with this. That was different, I muttered. Why? She asked. What was different? I had something to fight for back then, I said, feeling a lump form in my throat. I had a family that depended on me. And you still do, she snapped. But it's bigger than the one at home. There are 141 people and their families depending on you to handle this. None of your partners can keep the company afloat. You're the only businessman. If you lose, the company loses. Do you think Emma gives a damn about those families? If she gets half, she'll sell to the highest bidder, and you know who that bidder will be. Henningly will own everything you've worked on. Is that what you want? Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. She was right. I fought too hard to let it all slip away just because Emma decided to betray me. My children needed stability, and so did the people who worked for me. The company was my legacy, and if those kids were mine, I was going to make sure they were taken care of, no matter what. But as for Emma, she made her choice. I grieved the relationship when everything else was secure. The fog of confusion lifted, replaced by a sharp, focused anger. I sat down next to Evelyn, driven by a new determination. "Let's make a plan," I said. Evelyn's eyes glinted with satisfaction. "That's the Gary I need right now, someone who knows how to plan for the future." We spent the rest of the evening drafting a strategy to secure the company. At first, I suggested selling my shares to my partners, but Evelyn quickly shut that down. "You can't trust them to run it," she said. "Once they're majority shareholders, they'll tear it to the ground. You need to maintain control." In the end, we decided to sell the company into an offshore trust, which would purchase it at market price. I'd remain on as CEO, but with a minimal salary, and since the trust was offshore, the courts wouldn't have jurisdiction over its documents. The ownership would be anonymous. On paper, I'd still be a millionaire, or would be, once everything was set, but I needed to get rid of my assets quickly, cash out my $401k, and free up the equity in the house. Thankfully, the house was only in my name. When we bought it, Emma had been pregnant with Henry, and the mortgage advisor suggested it would be easier if I held the loan since she wasn't earning at the time. I made a list of everything that needed to be done and sent a message to my company lawyer, requesting a meeting for the next day. After Evelyn left, I took a shower, half expecting not to sleep, but as soon as my head hit the pillow, I passed out. When my phone alarm woke me the next morning, I found a message from Emma. "You didn't inform me of your arrival. Is everything okay?" I stared at it for a moment, feeling the cold detachment. I typed back, "Sorry, I worked late and fell asleep. Everything's coming together now. I should be back on Thursday." She replied quickly, "Okay. See you. Love you. XS." I couldn't bring myself to respond to that last part. Those words felt foreign now. Evelyn knocked on my door a little after 8. I took another quick shower before she let me out. We ended up at a diner down the street, eating pancakes and bacon with maple syrup. It felt surreal, sitting there as if my life hadn't imploded. I reasoned that when everything settled, the weight of it all would finally hit me. But for now, I needed to stay focused. "Brian Spencer," Evelyn said between bites, referring to my lawyer, called and said he can meet us at 10. "We'll hit the bank first to cash out your $401k and release the equity from your house before heading over." "I get why consolidating my money is necessary," I said, still mulling over the logistics. "But there'll be a record of it. Can't the court just order me to pay her half?" Evelyn smirked. "Only if you still have it. That's where Vegas comes in. Once you cash out, spend a week there, blow a chunk of it, and make sure it happens before you file for divorce. That way, by the time you're in court, you'll be broke in debt, actually. The bank will foreclose on the house, and your salary will barely cover living expenses." "And if the kids are mine?" I asked. "Then you put everything into a trust for their college fund. Emma can't touch it, and technically, she'll earn more than you, so she might even end up paying you alimony." "When do the DNA results come in?" "The company said they should be available online sometime today," I said, checking my phone. I clicked the link in the email they'd sent me. The page began to load, but I hesitated, unsure if I was ready for the truth. I handed the phone to Evelyn, unable to look. She scrolled, her face calm, betraying nothing. I watched her closely, searching for any clues in her expression. Finally, she looked up. "The results aren't ready yet," she said. "The tracking data says they'll be in within 12 hours. I let out a long breath, realizing I'd been holding it. "Let's go," she said, standing up. "The bank should be open by now." Freeing up equity from the house and cashing out my 401 went surprisingly fast. I also closed all of our savings accounts, including the children's college funds, and transferred everything to a new account in my name. The only account I left untouched was the joint account, which had less than $10,000 in it anyway. When we finally sat down with Brian Spencer, my lawyer, he took in our plan but quickly poked a hole in it. "You're forgetting something," he said, flipping through some papers. I frowned, unsure. "What?" "You have a marriage contract." I blinked, surprised. "I do." Brian nodded. "It was part of the partnership agreement when we first started the company."